Hi guys, so if you're watching this video, I assume it's because you want to know how to use my Better Code Editor control in your own project, or you're just curious, excuse me, about how it operates under the hood. So if you haven't seen my introducing BCE video before this, you might want to. If I remember, I'll put a link in the description. Anyway, so here's the Better Code Editor development harness, which is the project that you'll get when you download the repo from GitHub. And I've tried to structure it really straightforward so it's easy to understand. In the navigator, you'll see we've got a folder called demo specific, which for the purposes of understanding how BCE works, you don't need to know. Okay, this is just the window for the demonstration, some images, etc. Okay, so we can mostly forget about that. Everything to do with Better Code Editor is in the BCE folder. Everything is prefixed with BCE, so we don't get any namespace clashes. Why, oh why, Gary, didn't you put this in a module and I can just drop a module into my project instead of having all these hundreds of classes? Well, I really wish I could have, but I like to have my classes and modules external to my project. So that means, let me show you. Let's bring up the Finder. I go to the repos, and you can see in the source code, I've got the development harness. And then here in a separate folder, I've got all the actual classes. And I like doing it that way because that means that if I make a change in this project to fix a bug, for instance, any other project that I'm using, that I'm working on, that also uses the Better Code Editor will benefit from those changes immediately. Now, because of how Xojo have engineered the IDE, you cannot have classes within a module if the module is external. So therefore, everything has to be made external. I can't just drop it into a module. It has to be individual classes. I've made a video about this. I'll try and remember to put a link below in how to handle external classes. But hopefully, when you download this repo, everything should just work for you. So this is where all the classes live. And dependencies is really important. Okay, so in order to get this to work, you're also going to need these dependencies. Now, these dependencies, there aren't many of them. They're all open source. They're all free. They're all written by me. And if you read the README, which I highly recommend you do, on the GitHub repository, it will explain how to get them and where to find them. But in essence, Better Code Editor depends on these. So Better Dictionary is essentially a dictionary subclass that handles string and text interchanges better. I haven't bundled it into BCE itself because, well, I use it in other projects, like I said, so it didn't make sense to make it part of Better Code Editor, which is why it's an external dependency. So we've got Better Dictionary. Notification Kit is essentially a class, a module, and an interface, and this is how BCE talks between its classes with this notification system. And I use it in other projects as well, so you're going to need that. Semantic version is a single class that really is there for versioning of themes. Text kit is there because as the BCE uses text, not string. Really important to know that. Oh no, Gary, why did you use text and not string? Well, in the README, I've explained that. There was a long forum thread about why I did this. In essence, it's because the string data type doesn't handle emojis and extended grapheme Unicode characters properly. So it doesn't return the correct length. And the only thing in Xojo that does, that is not dog slow, is text. Now it's being deprecated, but the CEO of Xojo, Jeff Pearlman, essentially said to me publicly that don't worry about it, just use it. So that's what I'm doing. And TextKit provides a number of extensions on the text data type, which make working with text easier. So that's why we need that. And UndoKit is the interface to the undo engine, which I use in lots of other apps. So you're going to need those. So the README will show you how to get this set up. Basically, you need to clone, I think it's 4 repos. And then when you load the project, depending on where you've saved them, Xojo IDE will say, hey, where's TextKit? Or hey, where's semantic version? And just point it to where they are. And then everything should just work and build. Once you've got things set up, the main class is BCE Canvas. Okay, so this is a Canvas subclass. Now, it's not really a Xojo Canvas subclass. It's technically it's a desktop text input canvas subclass. So many years ago, when Xojo switched from Carbon to Cocoa, they made a plugin called Text Input Canvas, which basically made the canvas handle text events better on Mac OS. Things like when you hold down, let me give you an example. Let's just open up a window, text edit. So if I hold down the E key, I get this little cool pop-up, which lets me sort of choose different characters and things. So things like that are not possible in Xojo in a canvas without the text input canvas. So what does this mean for me? Well, essentially, Xojo abandoned their development seemingly of text input canvas years ago, but Bjorn Eriksson from Einhuger Software has kindly taken up the plugin. It's open source and he maintains it, and it's available on his website, and I've also bundled it into the repository. So you have to put it in your plugins folder in the Xojo IDE, and then it will all work. Okay, it basically functions like a canvas. So you would drag this onto your window. Because I provide hooks in the canvas for you to have vertical and horizontal scroll bars, I figured it would, rather than just make everyone do that manually, I actually have an editor container here, BCE editor container, which is a container control that what you really want to do is drag this onto your window. And this has scroll bars that are automatically hidden and shown and linked correctly with a canvas. So if we go to the window, you'll see if I click on here, I've called this code, but it's a BCE editor container. So that's what is here on the demo window. Okay, so I would advise using that. So yeah, so I mean, how is it structured? Well, in essence, when you type in the canvas, the editor mostly has to query what's called a formatter. So every editor is assigned a formatter and a theme. So the theme is, as you might imagine, okay, it's how the editor styles the text that it has. And themes can be created programmatically. They're all subclasses of BCE theme. They can be loaded from disk or loaded from JSON. They can also be exported to JSON, and there are some shared methods on BCE theme which will validate if a theme is correct, it's got all the properties it needs, and even you can create a blank theme using a shared method, so you don't even have to, you don't mess up exporting the JSON. So every canvas needs a theme to tell it how to style the text, and that can be changed on the fly, and it needs a formatter. Now a formatter is what does most of the work here. Formatters have to implement the BCE formatter interface, which has a bunch of methods, okay, these methods here that the class has to implement. I've written 3. Ignore this as base formatter. It's because how I've chosen to write the formatters is to go through each character individually and analyze it rather than use regex or something. And a lot of the methods that I use are kind of common. So I have a base formatter class, and then these are all subclasses of, well, some of them I should say. Oh yeah, the Dart one is a subclass of base formatter. Actually, the Xojo formatter, I decided not to. I remember that now. But they implement the BCE formatter interface. And a formatter, essentially, when you type in the editor, every keystroke you do, the editor will say to the formatter, hey, here's a line, here's the current line of text, and it will pass that in as a BCE line, okay, which has lots of properties, including the contents of that line. It will pass that to the formatter and say, tokenize me. And it is the formatter's responsibility to look at the contents of that line and split it into tokens. Now, those of you who aren't sure about what tokens are, essentially they're the basic atomic unit of a programming language. So, if you have a string of characters, it will split it into integers, strings, identifiers, etc. It's probably worthwhile watching some of my Xojo videos, because the early ones we talk about writing a tokenizer. So that will give you a feeling for it. Or just look at the source code in, say, the Xojo formatter. You can see this method here. Tokenized line. So here what we do is we take the line, we get the tokens, and we assign the tokens to this tokens array property on the line. And then the editor has the information it needs to style them, because when we make a token, we say, hey, this is an integer token, this is an identifier token, and we can assign to that token a type. So every theme has to support, at the moment, it's 14 different token types, things like integers, strings, errors, and a tokenizer, when the formatter says this is an, let me explain this a bit better. Let's look at this code that's actually right here. So if we were tokenizing this line here, it would say, okay, this is at end is an identifier. So it would say, here's a token, its type is identifier. It's also, the formatter is free to say it is an identifier, but you know what? I'm going to be more granular about this. This is actually a method call. We could put brackets after it and say, okay, anything that's got brackets after it is a method call. So we can say this is a method call token. We'll say it's an identifier, but its preferred style is a method call. And then themes, and you'll see when you look at the structure of a theme, themes can say, oh, okay, I don't know how to style a method call. I do know how to style an identifier. So it means you get generic themes and more specific themes. So really, adding a programming language to BCE comes down to writing a formatter. And really, it should support any programming language you can think of. Looking at Dart and Xojo, I mean, Xojo is obviously a basic-like language, and Dart is a curly brace language, and I was able to do those pretty straightforward and easily. You'll notice in the formatter interface, it not only asks it to tokenize it, but sometimes it asks questions, like it will say, okay, is this a comment line? So the editor might sometimes say, hey, here's a line, should I consider this a comment or not? And your formatter would return true or false if it was a comment or not. We have methods like super return. So this is that the user has pressed control and return in the editor, and the editor will then pass that line to the formatter and pass the position on the line the caret is at, and say, hey, formatter, is there anything you want to do with this? Can you offer some sort of auto completion for it? And it's the formatter's job to analyze the contents of that line and say, hey, yeah, I can complete this for loop. And it returns it as what's called a BCE super return data. And you can look at what that is. Essentially, it needs to provide a snippet of text, which is the text that's going to be inserted into the editor, and then whether or not the editor should select any of that text, and what the offset applied to the caret should be. What else have we got that's worth talking about? So much, it's so hard to know what to talk about. I just wanted to give you a little brief overview of what is going on under the hood. Autocomplete, actually, that's probably quite important just to mention for those of you who are interested. So when you type a few characters, the editor will start raising an event saying, hey, look, I need some autocomplete help here. And specifically what it does is if we go to the demo window and we find the actual editor control, which is here, there is an event called autocomplete data for prefix. And what this means is the editor says, hey, on this line number, at this column, the user has typed this text, this prefix. Is there any auto completion that you can offer? So if I was to say type add in the editor, it would pass in add as the prefix and the line and the column it's at. And if I'm writing if my autocomplete engine supports Xojo, I might say add. Well, I could have add address of or add handler. These are keywords I could complete, so I would return those as what's called BCE autocomplete data, okay, which is another class. It's pretty simple, and all that has is a bunch of suggestions that the editor should present to the user. Now, really, if you're doing this really richly, what you would do at this point is you would have periodically, perhaps every second or two, you would have in the background on a timer your app would be parsing the contents of the canvas. I mean, the canvas has a method to get all the contents, and what you would do is you would say every few seconds, perhaps every second or two, you would say, editor, give me all the contents, and then you would parse that to figure out, you would tokenize it, and you would also have to be looking at where variables were declared, get their scope, etc., and then keep that sort of cached. And then when the editor said, hey, the user's typed something, do you have anything to offer? You would then have to query what you've parsed and say, yeah, we've got these keywords are available, but also there's these variables in scope, etc. So I haven't done that in the demo. I've done a really basic autocomplete engine, which you can see here. All it does really is it essentially has a big array, a sorted array of things that you've added to it, that it doesn't actually read variables or anything like that. But it does illustrate how you would do an autocomplete engine. And I think I'm going to write a proper Xojo parser and integrate it back into Better Code Editor. So watch this space. Anyway, I'm going to start rambling now. I hope this has helped a little bit about what's going on under the scenes. Leave a comment below if you need anything clarifying, or find me on the Xojo forums, or if you think there's an issue with BCE, then please raise an issue on the GitHub repository. Okay, thanks very much.